All right, so there is the answers to the questions PDF on the assignment today, but just to go through some of them for you. So you would have had to get the answers to possibly 4 and 5 from your textbook. So urea is produced in your liver and your kidneys remove it from your body, and urea is produced when protein breaks down. Now we'll look at this again when we do the digestive system, but it can be asked in the context of the excretion system. In terms of the other questions, the diagram is just the diagram, so you can refer back to your notes to check how good your diagram was on that. But in terms of the composition, and we'll learn more about this today, so your renal artery contains all the excretion products you're trying to get rid of, so the water, the salt, and the urea. So that this is the way into your kidney. And then once your blood has essentially been cleaned, it comes back out in your renal vein, and then the water and salts that are there are because they're needed for osmoregulation. So your renal vein is essentially cleaner blood, but you're not going to be using that word to describe for the SEC. Okay, there's nothing new here. And vitamin D we've done, and we have our erector, we have our melon, and we have our sebum. So there's nothing new left for the rest of the questions. So once it's made, we're looking at the root out of the body. But before we do that, we would have done a dissection, and you will do it when we come home. And there are certain parts to the kidney. So we're going to look at them from this perspective. So I'm on page 187 in my version of the notes book, and it has the diagram of a kidney labelled with the locations of the 3 jobs. So when we draw our kidney, so we're looking now specifically at the kidney, we have this kidney shape here, which is our ureter and our urethra. We again have our renal artery coming from our aorta. And we also are going to have our renal vein coming from our vena cava. But now we're going to look inside in the kidney if we could see it. So what we see when we do it is we have a different colour out here on the edge. And then inside we have, they're called pyramids. They kind of look like little triangles that are in our kidneys. And when we'll see them in real life, it's just they're going to be different colours worth of stuff that's in there. So in terms of our labels up again, we have our aorta here, and we have our renal artery here. And if this time now you want to add labels, so your blood is coming from your heart and it's going in. And then in our blue, we have our vena cava, which all sounds like it would be a great wine. And we have our renal vein. So we had those diagrams the last day, but you might now want to put the arrows in. So the renal vein is taking blood from your kidneys, your renal artery is bringing it in. And the bits then that we're going to I'm going to colour this bit in here for ourselves to label up now. So we're looking specifically at the parts of the kidneys. So out here on the very, very edge, this bit here is called our cortex. The triangle-y bits that are in here is called your medulla. So we've seen the word medulla when we did medulla oblongata for control of our diaphragm and making us breathe in. This white bit that we've coloured in here is called a pelvis, and this is the tube that takes the urine once it's made to your bladder, your ureter. Now we have to know about the jobs that our cortex does. So I am going to move this down ever so slightly for myself. You hopefully have more room on your page. So I'm going to put my cortex here. So that's this bit here. And now in terms of our jobs, there are 3 jobs, and your cortex essentially does all of them. So it does filtration, it does a thing called secretion. So filtration, secretion, and both your medulla and your cortex do what's called reabsorption. Now, this all will have to do with the nephron when we do it, but in general terms, this is what we are looking for, or what. So our cortex does everything. So if you want to put that down here, so your cortex does all the jobs, it does everything, but your medulla only does reabsorption. Okay, so pause that if you need to. I am going to move on. So we just have loads of different pictures, and we'll see our kidneys when we see them, and we'll talk about them later. We've done our diagram now, we don't need this. The only thing I think that I wish to add into this, and I'll do it in yellow, is this is urine to bladder. Now, in terms of our kidneys, so I put these in brackets, but it's essentially dirty blood comes from our aorta. It goes into your renal arteries and then into your kidneys. It contains all of the waste products collected from all over the body. It is filtered, the blood is filtered by your kidneys, and anything useful is reabsorbed back into your bloodstream. And finally, we have blood will leave our kidneys through our renal veins and go back to our heart to be transported around our body. So the clean and dirty comments here are really only for you to get an understanding. The SCC aren't really interested in knowing about that. So as far as they're concerned, it's just blood. And the reason it's dirty for us is that it has the excretion products, and when it's clean, those excretion products have been removed. Now, again, we've seen this, so this is just showing you your blood goes in, it's pushed into your kidney, it's going to be filtered, it's going to be reabsorbed, and once you've made your urine, it will end up going down through the pelvis and into your bladder. Now, just little bits about urine. So in terms of filtration, it's happening in the cortex of each kidney, and small substances are forced out of your blood and into your kidney. So reabsorption then is when you take back the useful substances. So they're reabsorbed back into your blood. You're not going to be removing them. And reabsorption happens in the cortex and in the medulla. And the last bit is secretion. So we've said up here, if you already have this in your diagram for your kidney, secretion happens in your cortex, and it's potassium ions and hydrogen ions that are secreted from the blood into the cortex of your kidney. Now, in terms of urine, so urine is essentially the metabolic waste and toxic products that we don't really want. The urine, in terms of what it's made up of, is mostly water, very little salt, very little urea, and very little salt. And you will also have other hormones that will be secreted in there. So females, when they're pregnant, can actually wee on a stick now, and it's looking for a hormone called gonadotropin, and that will tell you whether you're pregnant or not, because it'll only be present if you are pregnant. In terms of then urine, once it leaves your medulla, it's going into the pelvis, it's going into your ureter, into your bladder, and finally out through your urethra. In terms of the bladder itself, so it is a muscular bag. It has 2 sphincter muscles where your urethra opens, and that happens when your bladder is full. So small babies, once their bladder is half full, it opens automatically, but for us, we can control it. Your bladder, because it's a muscular bag, can contract, and as we've said, you have to teach your sphincter to actually open or close, and usually that's about from the age of 2. And the last little bit that we're going to do today is just talk a little bit more about osmoregulation. So again, osmoregulation, you should be thinking of osmosis. So it's controlling the water and salt concentration so that we can maintain this constant internal environment. And the way kidneys vary our water and salt concentration. So to do this, they will vary the water and salt concentration of your urine, and they will also control, won't have that down below, so apologies. They will also control the pH of body fluid by making your urine more or less acidic, and that's where those H+ ions for secretion come in. And that is where we are going to leave it today. So you have loads of homework questions to go through. Some of them you may need to use your textbook to find the answers to, because it's kind of next lesson's content, but just do your best. I am on Zoom should you need me.